I should have listened to my clutch mother when she told me never to trust a planet that smelled like wet dirt and carbon dioxide. But no, I had to go and volunteer for the Krell Dominion's resource acquisition fleet. Thought it would be exciting, you know? See the galaxy, plunder some backwater worlds, retire with enough credits to buy my own asteroid. Simple plan. Foolproof, really. Turns out, I'm the fool. My name is Varkesh, and I'm what you humans would call a logistics officer. Third claw from the bottom of the military hierarchy, which means I get to do all the actual work while the generals take all the actual credit. On the day we arrived at your little blue marble, I was sitting in my pod reviewing resource surveys, trying to figure out how many cargo haulers we would need to strip mine your continents. The numbers were beautiful. Water, rare earth metals, organic compounds, something you call oil that burned with delightful efficiency. Earth was basically a shopping mall for an expanding empire. Commander Threxus, may his scales rot and fall off, Huff stood on the bridge with that insufferable pride he always wore like a second skin. Huff, 6 arms crossed over his chitinous chest, mandibles clicking in satisfaction. This will be glorious, he announced, to anyone within hearing range. The humans have no unified planetary defense. Their weapons are primitive. Their governments cannot even agree on basic climate protocols. This will be the easiest conquest in Dominion history. I remember thinking, yeah, that tracks. Your species did look pretty disorganized from orbit. Hundreds of different nations. Constant squabbling. Still using chemical propulsion for most of your spacecraft. We had been monitoring your broadcast for cycles. We watched your news programs. We saw your wars. Honestly, you looked like you were one bad election cycle away from doing our job for us. Threxus ordered the fleet into high orbit. 37 battle cruisers, each one capable of leveling a city with a single plasma barrage. We had drop ships, atmospheric fighters, ground assault mechs, the whole package, standard protocol for a level 3 civilization that had barely made it past their own moon. Overkill? Maybe. But the Dominion didn't become the third largest empire in the Andromeda sector by taking chances. The first message we sent down was pretty straightforward. Surrender your resources, accept Dominion governance, and we'll let most of you live. Standard stuff. We gave you 48 hours to respond. Threxus was feeling generous that day, probably because he had just won big at tiles the night before. Your response came back in 11 languages simultaneously, which was impressive from a translation standpoint but somewhat confusing from a diplomatic one.
Oh.
The gist of it, though? No.
Oh.
Just, no. Followed by some colorful suggestions about what we could do with our demands, several of which were anatomically impossible for my species but points for creativity. They refuse? Threxus couldn't believe it. His eye stalks actually drooped. They refuse? Look at our fleet. Look at their technology. They still use combustion engines. They have diseases we eradicated 10,000 years ago. They eat animals. Who refuses an offer like this? I pulled up the data on my display. Commander.
It appears that despite their technological limitations, humans have something our analysts call stubborn determination.
The reports suggest they have a historical pattern of fighting against superior forces. Patterns. Threxus waved a claw dismissively. I'll show them a pattern. Begin the demonstration strikes. Target their military installations. Show them what real power looks like. This is where things started getting weird. We hit 32 military bases simultaneously. Precision strikes. Minimal collateral damage. We were being nice, relatively speaking. In my experience, most civilizations fold after a display like that. The message is clear, right? We can hit you whenever we want, wherever we want. Resistance is futile. Yada yada yada. But then your species did something unexpected. Something our tactical computers literally could not predict. You got angry. Not scared. Not compliant. Angry. Within hours, every human government on the planet stopped fighting each other.
Just stopped.
Conflicts that had been going on for decades suddenly paused. Your United Nations, which our intelligence had dismissed as a toothless debate club, convened an emergency session. In 6 hours they drafted something you called the Terran Defense Compact. Every nation signed it, every single one. That's impossible, said Threxus, watching the data scroll across his screens. They can't just unify like that. There are protocols, procedures, bureaucratic delays. No civilization can mobilize this quickly. Apparently humans can, when sufficiently motivated, I muttered, though I made sure Threxus didn't hear me. I was already reading reports from our ground surveillance drones. Your factories were retooling overnight. Civilian manufacturing plants were being converted to military production. Your internet, that primitive but surprisingly efficient data network, was lighting up with coordination efforts. It was like watching an anthill that someone had just kicked, except the ants were building guns. The second wave of attacks was supposed to break your spirit. We targeted infrastructure, power grids, water treatment facilities, communication hubs, nothing that would cause mass casualties, but enough to show you that modern civilization requires modern technology, and modern technology requires peace. The second wave of attacks was supposed to break your spirit. We targeted infrastructure, power grid. You know what you did? You adapted. In some places within hours, towns and cities that lost power started running generators. Communities organized food distribution networks, using those ancient devices you call bicycles. Your ham radio operators, hobbyists we had dismissed as quaint, created a backup communication system that our jamming tech couldn't touch because it was so hilariously low-tech. And then you started hitting back. The first ship we lost was the surveillance frigate Keithis Prime. Just gone.
Halls.
One moment it was in low orbit over somewhere called Nevada. The next moment it was debris raining down on the desert.
Halls.
The official report said catastrophic engine failure, but I saw the telemetry before Threxus had it classified. Something had hit that ship, something fast and hot, and launched from the surface. Pow, Threxus demanded at the senior staff meeting. His mandibles were clicking so fast it sounded like angry percussion. They don't have orbital strike capability. Our intelligence was very clear on this. Lieutenant Screeve, our intelligence officer, looked like he wanted to molt right out of his skin.
What?
Commander, it appears humans have been less than forthcoming about their defensive capabilities. We're detecting missile launches from locations that weren't on any military installation database. Underground facilities, mobile platforms. They're using something called solid rocket boosters with kinetic impactors. Primitive but apparently effective. Rocks, Threxus was now shouting. Are you telling me they're throwing rocks at our ships? Very fast rocks, sir, Screeve said quietly. Accelerated to significant fractions of orbital velocity. And they're not stupid rocks. They have guidance systems, simple compared to our technology, but adequate for hitting large targets in predictable orbits. I bit back a laugh, which would have come out as a gurgle, and gotten me thrown in the brig. You magnificent primates, you couldn't build a proper plasma cannon, so you just made your missiles go really, really fast and said, physics will handle the rest. It was so simple it was almost elegant, but it got worse, or better, depending on your perspective. Your military forces started using tactics that made no sense from a conventional standpoint. When our dropships landed to deploy ground forces, you didn't mass your troops in defensive positions like any rational species would. No, you scattered. Small units, highly mobile, hitting supply lines and communication relays instead of engaging our superior forces directly. We had the firepower. You had the home field advantage and apparently centuries of experience fighting each other in every terrain type imaginable. Your soldiers knew every street, every alley, every forest trail. Our forces kept walking into ambushes, in places that looked completely innocuous. A shopping mall in somewhere called Jakarta, a subway tunnel in Moscow, a cornfield in Iowa that seemed to stretch into infinity.
Humans fight like they're personally offended by our existence, observed Captain Morellis during one particularly frustrating briefing.
She had just lost an entire mechanized unit to what your military called an IED, which stood for Improvised Explosive Device. Improvised. You were making weapons out of fertilizer and fuel oil, and they were taking out our armor. Threxus slammed 3 of his arms on the table. They're insects. They're barely out of their caves. How are they doing this? Or had been doing some reading in your cultural databases. Something you humans love to do is document everything, including your own capacity for violence. Wars. So many wars. Thousands of years of armed conflict. Technological innovation driven by necessity. Tactical doctrine refined through bitter experience. You had practiced war on each other for your entire recorded history. We had thought that made you weak and divided. Turns out it made you really, really good at fighting. Commander, I said carefully. I think we may have underestimated the cultural factors. Humans have extensive experience in asymmetric warfare. Every major conflict in their history has involved some element of a weaker force finding creative ways to combat a stronger one. Then we'll stop being the stronger force, Threxus growled.
Oh.
We'll be overwhelming. Prepare for full-scale bombardment. If they won't surrender their resources willingly, we'll take them from the ashes. I wanted to tell him that was exactly the wrong move. That escalation would only make things worse. But I'm a third-claw logistics officer, and in the Krell Dominion, you don't contradict a commander unless you want to spend the rest of your career scrubbing waste recyclers. The bombardment order went out. All time out. Targets selected. Strategic value calculated. The fleet moved into firing positions over 6 major population centers: New York, Beijing, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, Lagos, Tokyo. The message was clear: surrender or watch your cities burn. That's when your president, a woman named Victoria Hayes with steel in her eyes that I could see even through the video transmission, made a broadcast that went out on every frequency. No negotiation, no pleading, just a simple statement that I will never forget as long as I live. You want Earth's resources? Come down here and take them. Every bullet, every bomb, every drop of blood you spill will cost you 10 times what you'll gain. We are not your subjects. We are not your cattle. We are humanity, and we bow to no one. The transmission ended with coordinates, geographic locations all over your planet, not military bases, civilian population centers, schools, hospitals, homes. She's calling our bluff, I said, horror dawning. She's telling us that any bombardment will result in massive civilian casualties, and that the humans will make sure we pay for every single one. Threxy stared at the screen. For the first time since we had arrived at your planet, I saw something in his eyes that looked like doubt. They wouldn't. They can't. No rational species would choose extinction over submission. But that was the thing, wasn't it? You humans aren't always rational. Sometimes you're something far more dangerous. Sometimes you're emotional, passionate, willing to sacrifice everything for principles we Krell barely understood. Freedom, sovereignty, pride. You weren't bluffing. We knew it. You knew that we knew it, and the terrible calculus of war suddenly shifted in a direction that made even the Dominion's cold arithmetic start looking unfavorable. Threxes canceled the bombardment. Temporarily, he said. Tactical reassessment, he claimed. But I could see the calculation happening behind his eye stalks. Every ship we lost, every soldier that didn't come back from your surface, every resource we expended trying to pacify your stubborn species, it was adding up to a cost that exceeded the value of what we came for. And that was just the beginning. You humans were preparing something. Your factories were running triple shifts. Your scientists were sharing data across borders at unprecedented rates. Your collective intelligence, billions of minds networked together through that internet of yours, was solving problems faster than our strategists could create them. I pulled up long-range surveillance data from your industrial centers and felt my secondary stomach clench. You were building something, lots of somethings, and they didn't look primitive anymore. The war for Earth had only just started, and already I was beginning to suspect something that would have gotten me executed for defeatism, if I had said it out loud. We might lose this. 3 weeks into the occupation, or attempted occupation, as I was starting to think of it, the Krell Dominion had lost 14 ships, approximately 4,000 ground troops, and every shred of confidence that this was going to be a quick and profitable venture. Commander Threxes had developed a nervous tic, where his left eye stalk twitched every time someone mentioned the word human, which, given that we were orbiting their planet trying to subjugate them, came up a lot in conversation. I was in my pod running supply calculations when the first distress call came through. The cargo hauler Persix had been hit by something while descending to collect mineral samples from a site in Australia, not an explosion. Something worse. The crew reported that their navigation systems had been compromised, their communication arrays were broadcasting gibberish, and their life support was cycling through emergency protocols for no apparent reason. Virus, announced Lieutenant Screeve at the emergency briefing, looking like someone had just told him his entire clutch had failed to hatch. The humans have developed a cyber warfare package that specifically targets our ship operating systems. They uploaded it during a routine supply run when one of our shuttles interfaced with a human communication node. Threxes went absolutely still, which is what Krell do right before they either molt or commit murder. They hacked us? They hacked a Dominion military vessel with their primitive binary computers. Not exactly primitive anymore, sir. Screeve pulled up a holographic display showing lines of code that made my head hurt just looking at them. They've made significant advances in the past 3 weeks. Apparently humans have something called open source collaboration, where thousands of their programmers work together on projects. They've been treating our invasion as a problem to solve, and they're solving it faster than we can adapt. The thought about the implications. Your species had taken one look at our technology, reverse engineered what you could from crashed drones and damaged equipment, and then crowdsourced solutions across your entire planet. It was terrifying and impressive in equal measure, like watching someone solve a puzzle while the puzzle was actively trying to kill them. The cyber attacks started showing up everywhere. Whole ships would suddenly find their weapons systems locked. Whole ground units reported their combat suits overheating or freezing at the worst possible moments. One reconnaissance drone ended up broadcasting Terran music, something called heavy metal, at maximum volume until its power cells died. Our technical teams were spending more time fighting your hackers than they were supporting actual combat operations. But the real nightmare started when you figured out how to shoot back properly. Your engineers had been studying every engagement, measuring every weapon we used, calculating trajectories and energy signatures, and then you did what humans apparently do best. You stole our homework and made it better. The first Dominion ship to get hit by a human-built plasma weapon was the destroyer Qualix over the North Atlantic. The shot came from a mobile platform. Your military called it the Retribution Array. Somewhere in the mountains of Colorado, our sensors detected the energy spike 2 seconds before impact, which sounds like enough time until you realize that plasma moves really fast. The Qualix survived, barely, with catastrophic damage to its port propulsion systems. The captain's report was almost incoherent. They have plasma cannons. How do they have plasma cannons? We've been here less than a month. How indeed. Turns out when you threaten human extinction, they get motivated. Your top scientists had been working around the clock, sharing data across every research institution on the planet. MAN-IT was collaborating with Moscow State University. CERN was coordinating with labs in Shanghai and Bangalore. You had taken our technology, understood the principles, and then built your own versions using materials and methods we had never considered. Were they as good as ours? Not quite. Your plasma containment was inefficient. Your energy consumption was about 3 times higher than optimal, and at least 2 of your prototype weapons had catastrophic failures that took out the testing facilities. But they worked well enough to hurt us, and you were improving them with every iteration. Threxus held another senior staff meeting. His mandibles were clicking so rapidly they sounded like malfunctioning machinery.
Options. I want options.
Someone tell me how we pacify this miserable rock without spending the next decade in a grinding war of attrition. Captain Rellis, who had been leading ground operations and looked like she had aged 10 cycles in the past month, spoke up. Commander, I don't think pacification is possible with our current force allocation. Every engagement costs us resources and personnel. Human resistance is not decreasing. It's intensifying. They're learning our tactics faster than we can adapt new ones. Then we bring in reinforcements. Threxus snapped. The Dominion has fleets stationed throughout this sector. Sir, I said, knowing I was probably ending my military career but unable to stay silent any longer. I've run the logistics. With current resource expenditure rates and accounting for human technological advancement, full subjugation would require a force 3 times our current size, and an occupation lasting at minimum 5 standard years. The cost in ships, personnel, and materials would exceed the total value of Earth's resources by a factor of approximately 7. The silence in the briefing room was absolute. In the Krell Dominion, you don't just tell a commander that his war is unprofitable. That's basically treason with math. Threxus turned all 4 of his eyes toward me. Are you suggesting we withdraw? Logistics Officer Varkesh. I'm suggesting that we're winning battles, but losing the war, sir. Humans are demonstrating exponential technological growth under pressure. 3 weeks ago they were throwing missiles at us. Now they have plasma weapons and cyber warfare capabilities. In another month, what will they have? In 6 months? Before Threxus could have me arrested for defeatism, alarms started blaring. Multiple contacts, launching from Earth's surface. Not missiles this time, something bigger. Our sensors tracked 12 objects climbing through the atmosphere, accelerating past what should have been possible for chemical rockets. They're warships, breathed Screeve, staring at his displays with open horror. Humans have built warships. In 3 weeks, they've built 12 combat spacecraft. I pulled up the technical data, and my tertiary heart skipped several beats.
Oh.
Your ships were ugly compared to ours, all hard angles and exposed engines, held together with what looked like aggressive optimism and welded metal. But they were armed. Plasma cannons, missile pods, kinetic impactors, and something our sensors couldn't quite identify but which made our threat assessment computers have what I can only describe as electronic panic attacks. The lead ship, you called it the Defiance because of course you did, opened a communication channel. A human male appeared on screen, wearing some kind of military uniform and an expression that suggested he was having the best day of his life. Krell Fleet, this is Admiral Marcus Okoye, of the Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of planetary sovereignty, and have committed acts of war against Earth. You have one opportunity to withdraw peacefully. Leave our system within the next 6 hours, or we will remove you by force. Threxus actually laughed. It sounded like grinding gravel. Admiral, you have 12 ships, primitive ships, built in a matter of weeks. We have 37 combat vessels, each one more advanced than anything your species has ever constructed. Do you really think you can threaten us? Okoye smiled, and I felt a chill run through my scales despite the temperature-controlled environment. Oh, Commander, we don't think we can threaten you. We know we can. You've been up here for 3 weeks, getting comfortable, establishing routines. We've been watching, learning, and preparing. You want to know what that unidentified weapon system is on our ships? We call them nuclear pulse drives. Do you know what happens when you detonate a nuclear weapon behind a ship designed to handle it? You go very fast. Do you know what happens when you detonate a nuclear weapon next to a ship that isn't designed for it? You die very fast. He wasn't bluffing. I could see it in his eyes, that same look. President Hayes had shown that terrible human willingness to pay any price, bear any burden, sacrifice anything for their freedom. You're insane, Threxus said. You'll destroy yourselves. Maybe, Okoye acknowledged, but we'll destroy you first, and that's what matters. 6 hours, Commander. Count them carefully. The transmission ended. The human fleet, your 12 impossible ships held together with determination and spite, took up positions between Earth and our fleet, weapons charged, systems active, ready to die for their planet. I had to know. I pulled up detailed scans of those ships. The crew complements were small, maybe 30 people per vessel. Volunteers according to the intercepted communications. Men and women who knew they were flying into a battle they would probably not survive. And they were doing it anyway. Some of them were sending messages home. Goodbyes to families. Final words to loved ones. Not one of them was backing down. What kind of species does that? What kind of civilization produces people willing to fly into certain death without hesitation, without doubt, just because someone threatened their home? The answer hit me like a plasma bolt to the thorax. A species we could never conquer. Not really. Not in any way that mattered. Threxus was receiving reports from across the fleet. Our ships were ready for combat. We had superior numbers, superior technology, superior firepower. On paper, we should have been able to swat those human ships out of space like annoying insects. But war isn't fought on paper. It's fought with blood and fire and the will to keep fighting when any rational being would surrender. And humans, I had learned, were not always rational. Sir, said Captain Rellis quietly, if we engage those ships and they deploy nuclear weapons at close range, we will take significant casualties even if we win. And that's just their space fleet. Ground forces are reporting that human military units are massing for coordinated counterattacks on all continents. They're not waiting for us to invade anymore. They're preparing to drive us off their planet. Threxus stared at the tactical display. 12 human ships against 37 Krell vessels.
They should have ordered the attack.
Dominion doctrine was clear.
You don't back down. You don't show weakness. You crush resistance with overwhelming force and move on to the next conquest.
But doctrine didn't account for the cost-benefit analysis scrolling across my secondary screen. It didn't account for the fact that even if we won this engagement, Earth would just build more ships.
Whole better ships.
Your entire industrial capacity was now focused on one goal, kicking us off your planet, and you were innovating faster than any species in recorded galactic history. It didn't account for the intelligence reports showing that you had made contact with other species in nearby systems. The Vryn Collective, the Septarian Union, independent traders and minor empires that had no love for the Dominion. You were reaching out, making alliances, telling everyone who would listen that the Krell could be beaten. We weren't just fighting for Earth anymore. We were fighting for the Dominion's reputation, and we were losing. Calculate jump coordinates for the edge of the system, Threxes said, his voice flat. Dead. All ships prepare for emergency withdrawal. Duck couldn't believe it. Sir, we're retreating? We're conducting a tactical repositioning pending reinforcement and strategic reevaluation, Threxes said. Which is military speak for yes, we're absolutely retreating. Lieutenant Screeve, prepare a report for High Command. Inform them that Earth requires a significantly larger commitment of resources than initial surveys indicated. What he meant was, Earth is too expensive to conquer, and those crazy primates are going to kill us all if we stay. The fleet began jumping out, one ship at a time, leaving orbit and fleeing to the outer system. The human ships didn't pursue. They held their positions, weapons still charged, watching us go with what I imagined was a mixture of relief and savage satisfaction. As my transport prepared to jump, I took one last look at your planet, that little blue and green marble that should have been an easy conquest, a retirement fund on a disk. Instead, it had become the Dominion's most humiliating defeat in 3 centuries. I thought about your President Hayes, Admiral Okoye, the millions of humans who had put aside their differences and united against a common threat, the scientists who had achieved in weeks what should have taken decades, the soldiers who had fought us with primitive weapons and unbreakable spirits, the volunteers who had flown into battle knowing they might die but doing it anyway. You humans are absolutely terrifying. You know that? You're impulsive, emotional, and shockingly violent. When threatened, you fight like cornered predators even when you have room to run. You refuse to acknowledge when you're beaten. You turn every setback into motivation, and every attack into a reason to hit back harder. And somehow, impossibly it works. The jump drive engaged and Earth disappeared from my sensors. I filed my final report, already knowing what High Command would decide. Earth would be marked as a restricted zone. Too dangerous, too costly, not worth the effort. 3 months later, I heard that humans had made contact with the Galactic Assembly. You showed up in those ugly, beautiful ships of yours and demanded recognition as a sovereign species. And because everyone had heard what happened to the Krell Dominion's 3rd fleet, because word had spread about the planet that fought back and won, you got it. I also heard that Earth was now selling defensive technology to other species, teaching them your tactics, sharing your rapid development techniques. You weren't content with just defending yourselves. No, you were making sure everyone else could defend themselves against empires like ours. I retired early, bought a small station in a quiet system far from Earth, and now I run a trading post. Sometimes I see human ships passing through. They always nod or wave or send a friendly greeting, like we're old acquaintances instead of former enemies, like they harbor no grudge against the species that tried to enslave them. But I see it in their eyes. That steel, that fire, that absolute refusal to bow. The Krell Dominion wanted Earth's resources, wanted them badly enough to send a fleet, to start a war, to threaten extinction. We thought we were the predators and you were the prey. We were wrong. You didn't just defend your planet. You didn't just survive. You looked at the vast, hostile galaxy full of species more advanced than yours, and you said, with that characteristic human confidence that borders on insanity, we belong here, we're staying, and if you want to test that, we're ready. And the galaxy believed you. I still have nightmares sometimes. I dream that I'm back in orbit over Earth, watching those 12 impossible ships rising from your atmosphere, watching humans do what they do best. Fight. Adapt. Survive. Win. Then I wake up and remember that I'm on the other side of the galaxy, safely away from your terrifying, magnificent, absolutely insane species, and I thank my ancestors that Earth is on the list of planets we never ever visit again. Because the wrath that followed wasn't just military defeat. It was something worse. It was the moment an empire realized that some species, some planets, some people cannot be conquered, not because they're too strong or too advanced, but because they simply refuse to accept any outcome except victory. That's humanity. That's Earth. That's what we learned the hard way. And I suspect the galaxy will keep learning it for centuries to come. Sleep well, primates. You earned it. But maybe keep those plasma cannons charged, just in case. Knowing you humans, you probably already are.